Right, my name's David. I've come along this morning to tell my story. There are out there many stories to be told, and I hope that you will listen and watch those stories and hopefully be in a position to tell your story where we can all gain benefit from our own experiences. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alex Mitchell and I'm the creator of CancerStories. CancerStories is a video diary program which is designed to help people like yourself manage their cancer. And the key aim is to record previous patients' experiences, really a wide variety of cancers. And these are patients who are genuine, real patients from Leicestershire who've given their consent to allow us to record their story onto DVD or the internet. What we ask those patients is really to give a brief account over 30 or 60 minutes. How did they manage with their diagnosis? And hopefully by watching their account, you'll be able to pick out some common themes from one or more of those videos. And those common themes might be things like what resources are available locally or nationally, or how do families cope, or how do people themselves manage with those awkward stages, either the initial diagnosis or the complications of treatment, or perhaps psychological and emotional complications, which are sometimes overlooked. So overall, we hope that by watching the video diary program, you'll be able to take some positives from other people's accounts, and hopefully that will help you better cope with your situation, whatever that is at the current time. Thanks for watching.
Right, my name is Dave Stewart. I've just attained my 68th birthday, which has some relevance to my story. I've been married twice, and by marriages have 5 children, 10 grandchildren, but we also include an 11th grandchild, Sophia May, who was born asleep on the 18th of June last year, but she is included in our family. I have 2 great-grandchildren. At the moment, our eldest daughter, Sarah, who lost Sophia May on the 19th of June, is expecting yet another grandchild, and my eldest granddaughter is expecting her 3rd child, which would be my 3rd great-grandchild. When I was at school, on one rainy day, I decided to take up rugby at the age of 11 years. I played rugby until I was about 45, 46, playing for the Saracens up until about the age of 20. I was a bus driver and a conductor with London Transport for 10 years, but then I served in the Metropolitan Police for 30 years, working in a very busy police station in London called Peckham. While I was a serving police officer, I joined the Board of Governors of our local girls' school, for which I was on for about 14 to 15 years, and left when I was chair. At the same time, I also set up with others, not on my own, but with others, a community group called the Friends of Peckham Rye. This was a group that would look and take on board the issues of our local park. When I retired at the age of 60, I decided to continue working, and I became a self-employed accredited representative, a highfalutin title which means quite simply I helped people at police stations who had been arrested. In order to do that, I had to gain an accreditation. So at the age of 60, I went back to Cardiff University in order to gain that accreditation, which I gained. So as can be seen, certainly throughout my early life, up until the age of about 60, I led a very active life, and then continued after retirement age as an accredited representative. Sadly, in September of 2011, it was discovered, or I was informed, that I was terminally ill with stomach cancer.
David, thanks for coming in today to share your story with us.
You're welcome.
It's very valuable that you've come in. We've only had one other person who's had a stomach cancer. So there will be viewers who really want to know what the stomach cancer caused and the complications, how to cope with it, that kind of thing. But I think your story perhaps starts before that.
Indeed.
Because you had a personal family experience with your wife, didn't you? What was the story there?
Well, first of all, one thing I certainly have learnt over the years, stomach cancer is extremely rare by cancer standards of today, if I could put.
Yeah.
When I retired from the police service in 2006, my wife decided that she wanted cosmetic surgery. I was able to commute some of my pension. And on the way to seeing the consultant cosmetic surgeon, she suddenly decided that she wanted a breast enhancement, which I was against. I was happy for what she wanted done, which was liposuction. When we arrived at the cosmetic surgeon in Blackheath Hospital, we sorted out the liposuction, and then my wife actually told the cosmetic surgeon that she wanted a breast enhancement. He asked her, what size does she want to be? She said she wanted to be a 36D. So the cosmetic surgeon, throughout this video I'll mention no names, the cosmetic surgeon said, well, let's have a look, see what you are. And he told her, in fact, Mrs. Stewart, you are a 36D. You are the size that you want to be.
Right.
However, he also found with his hands something that he wasn't happy with. And it has to be borne in mind at this stage, my wife was three and a half years away before her first mammogram. As that women of, I think, 50 get, she was not there. So as a result of that, the consultant wrote to our GP. My wife was immediately referred to the breast unit at King's College Hospital. They still had trouble finding out what the consultant cosmetic surgeon had found, but eventually found that she did have breast cancer. One of the significances, and which has greatly affected both of us, is that the operation for breast cancer was to be performed on the 28th of February 2006. That was the day I retired from the police service, and it was also the date of our 25th wedding anniversary. So as I'm sure can be understood, the shock of having a breast cancer operation, not only on the day that I retired, but more importantly our 25th wedding anniversary. Fortunately, King's College Hospital understood and brought the operation date forward by 2 or 3 days. But on the day I retired, and our 25th wedding anniversary, my wife wasn't too well. But women, when you go and ask for your breast size, be aware you might be the size that you want to be.
That's funny. So your wife actually, through that request, unfortunately did find out that she had
breast
cancer. How do you feel that process was handled at that time?
I have to say, unlike myself, which you will hear about later, the breast cancer unit at King's College Hospital was superb. I could not fault them in any way, neither could my wife. They were absolutely excellent, and I couldn't give them any higher praise for the understanding and the way in which they dealt with my wife's breast cancer.
Do you think there's a variation in units across the country?
Yes. Yes, I think one only has to watch the news with the National Health Service in general as it is at the moment, that there are variations across the country. As I say, fortunately with my wife, we did deal with the breast cancer unit at King's College Hospital, and they were absolutely excellent. And I can't speak for any others because we didn't go to any others.
What was her recovery process like after she came home?
Very difficult, very difficult. My wife has an image problem. I think it's called body dysmorphia or something along those lines. And of course, having her left breast operated on with the remaining scar shattered her. It really shattered. But having said that, she went forward very positively and attended counselling sessions, and she also attends, and still does even to this day, still attends cancer support centres. In my case, of course, it's not only for herself but also those suffering with cancer that she also attends the Marlin Reed in Colville.
Did she have to fight for those services, or were they offered?
They were offered to her.
Yeah.
Interestingly for yourself, perhaps, Dr. Mitchell, was originally when my wife had the breast cancer operation, there was a support group set up by St Thomas's Hospital, which met every month.
Yes.
That required a cancer nurse to be present. Due to government cutbacks, that cancer nurse was taken away, and unfortunately the support group folded.
Interesting. That's sad to hear, because that's happened in other places as well. It's a shame when resources are cut like that, definitely.
But the Marlin Reed, of course, is a different kettle of fish altogether, and it doesn't require a cancer nurse to be present there, so she's happy to go there. But again, as I say, she's there more for support for those with cancer, i.e. me.
And on the topic of how your wife coped, and also how it affected your relationship, were there lifestyle changes, or were there differences in the way that you two coped together at that time before you were diagnosed?
No, there wasn't. I mean, I understood my wife's issue over her image anyway, so we'd had some of these difficulties before. But no, we worked through them, and we were actually okay with them. One of the other disappointing things was that on our 25th wedding anniversary, we decided that we would renew our wedding vows. And unfortunately, we couldn't do it, obviously, on our 25th wedding anniversary because of my wife having a breast cancer operation. But we did do it later, and we got married a second time. Got married the first time, got married the second time. We decided to renew our wedding vows on our 25th wedding anniversary. We didn't at that time have a clue of what we were actually going to do to celebrate that. But fortunately, when I left the police service, I obviously was able to get some of my pension. So we decided to do a cruise. And the cruise we took was from Auckland in New Zealand to Sydney in Australia. And we did that throughout the Christmas period. And the interesting thing was that if you don't know, you actually get to New Year's Eve celebrations. When we left New Zealand to go across to Tasmania on the way to Australia, we had one New Year's Eve, but when we crossed the national date line, we then had another. So we've had 2 New Year's Eves in our lifetime.
That sounds like a cruise worth taking, definitely.
But my abiding memories is one of my wife carrying her wedding dress from the front door of our house, where we lived then in Dulwich in London, actually to the cruise ship itself in Auckland. Wow. She carried it every inch of the way. And my other abiding memory is my wife running along a corridor in the cruise ship like a school child, to see the joy, to see the smile.
Yeah, that's amazing.
To see the happiness on her face.
That's really amazing.
No one can take that away from me. No one.
Definitely. I'm going to ask you now about how your cancer came about, because several years after your wife was diagnosed, you had the experience of being diagnosed with a stomach or gastric cancer. What happened?
Sadly, it's a very sorry tale to tell, in that where my wife had excellent care in her breast cancer care, mine sadly fell, to quote an independent observer, fell way below the standards we expect of our service. I had for some time been suffering from vomiting, and when I say vomiting, I mean projectile, violent vomiting. And so I went to see my GP. In July of 2009, I was sent for an ultra scan. Nothing was found. The vomiting carried and continued. So I went back to my GP, and in September of 2009, my GP referred me to the gastroenterology unit at King's College Hospital. What is significant about that is we didn't know at the time, but found out some 3 years later, that on the doctor's notes, when she referred me to King's College Hospital, she actually wrote in her notes, plan to refer for endoscopy. However, she did not include that in the referral letter. There was then a further delay for some reason. I did not get an appointment with King's College Hospital, and my GP had to chase that up. After about 2 to 3 months later, I finally got an appointment with King's College Hospital, and I think I had a hyperlacta test. I may be corrected on that one, which to my memory was negative, but I understand was positive originally, and I took antibiotics, which cleared it up. So by the time I got to see the consultant gastroenterologist at King's College Hospital, and again I mention no names, everything had all cleared up. The interesting thing about seeing the gastroenterologist was he introduced himself as, I am the world's leading expert on stomachs, and what I don't know about stomachs isn't worth knowing. Because of the way, perhaps it was me, but explained my symptoms, is he put it down to the fact that I was overindulging, that I'd been overeating. He based it solely on the fact that, like millions of others, I went out to the Harvester every now and again, had a 3-course meal, but in the middle of the night, or maybe afterwards, I would vomit. By this time, I was on omeprazoles. My GP had already put me on omeprazoles, and Dr. No names mentioned, continued omeprazoles. One of the fascinating things with the consultant gastroenterologist, the last thing I said to him was, cold water irritates my stomach. The vomiting continued, it got worse. I continued to see my GP on 3-month medication reviews. At one time, because the omeprazoles were not working, I was put on Lanzaprols. Lanzaprozoles, yeah.
To settle the stomach out.
They didn't work either. So I was advised by my GP to stop taking them. 3 days after I stopped taking them, I had half a glass of cold water. The next thing, my wife found me collapsed in the downstairs toilet with my head down the toilet, projectile vomiting, etc., etc. By this time, I'd also lost about 2.5, 3 stone in weight. For the very first time in my life, and this was absolutely for me personally very frightening, an ambulance was called. I'd never been in an ambulance as an emergency patient in my 65 years. I'd been in as a police officer, obviously, but not as an emergency patient. It frightened the life out of me. God knows what it did to my wife, but of course bearing in mind what she'd been through, and at that time was still going through because she hadn't had the all clear, we then went off to King's College Hospital. I was detained overnight, thinking that I was an emergency patient. The following day, it was on a Friday, I saw a junior doctor from the gastroenterology unit. I was told that emergency scans had been cancelled in my case. This junior doctor then went on to explain that I could lay in the hospital bed for 2 to 3 weeks, where I might get a scan in 2 weeks, or I might have to wait for 3 weeks. However, if I was an outpatient, I would probably get one quicker. I, of course, thinking I'm an emergency patient, was a little taken aback by that. And after discussions with my 2 daughters, both who were adults at the time, and my wife, I decided, well, I'd rather lay in my own bed and wait than lay in a hospital bed and wait. I did eventually get an appointment for an endoscopy. I went home, and about 2 weeks later ended up back in hospital in exactly the same position as I had before. Even more frightened now because what's wrong with me? I do not have a clue and no one is saying anything to me. The thing that really annoyed me the second time was everybody I'd spoke to, their first question was, what was the result of the endoscopy? I had this from the nurse, from the doctors and even medical students. I was quite happy for medical students to come in and have a chat, pass the time and hope that they learned something anyway. But of course I couldn't give them the answer because I didn't have one. I then came up against another consultant, gastroenterologist, but her words were, Mr. Stewart, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I'm not going to stop until I find out. On the third or fourth day that I was in hospital on this occasion, I had an endoscopy. Around about 2 years after I'd first pointed out to the GP my problem, and about 15, 16 months after that I'd saw the first gastroenterologist who simply put my symptoms down to overeating, overindulgence. We were told by the doctor who carried out the endoscopy that there was a particular concern there, and that would be cancer. She mentioned lymphedema, but because my wife had already had the experience of cancer, she knew exactly what was because she'd been told the same herself. Anyway, we carried on with further tests, and eventually we saw, in August, we saw the gastroenterologist for her results. I'd had some other tests and examinations done. Of course, the clue was that with the gastroenterologist, the consultant was a Macmillan nurse, so straight away we knew. Strangely enough, it hadn't bothered me. It didn't bother me. None of what's happened to me has particularly bothered me. It's my wife. My wife is my life. End of story. End of story. She then told me, of course, that I did have stomach cancer, but it was curable and it was operable. So I was referred to the oncology unit at Guy's Hospital. During the meantime, I think I had a PET scan.
Yeah.
PET scan?
Yeah. Functional imaging.
I had a PET scan. Where the relevance of my wife comes back in her breast cancer is on these dates will live with me forever. On September the 12th, 2011 at 2 o'clock, my wife had an appointment in the breast cancer unit at King's College Hospital. On September the 12th, 2011, I had an appointment in the oncology unit at Guy's Hospital at 3 o'clock, an hour later. Because of that, my wife's appointment was brought forward, and my wife was told that she had the all clear, or was all clear as one could be with breast cancer. So she had the all clear. So we knew that after 5 years, she was fine. I went into the oncology unit, the gastroenterology unit at Guy's Hospital, thinking that I was going, and my wife thinking that I was going to be setting up dates for operation and so on and so forth. I was told that I had stomach cancer, stage TN3. I was told that I'm classified terminally ill and that I could only receive palliative care, and that my cancer was not operable and neither was it curable. That particular second, my wife's life was destroyed, totally destroyed. She punched the wall of the consulting room and was last seen running along the corridors of Guy's Hospital being chased by a Macmillan nurse. I know it's humorous, but that's the way you handle these things, perhaps. Eventually, she, of course, discovered she also broke her wrist in punching the wall of the hospital. But from that moment forward, I think it's fair to say our lives were destroyed, but my wife's life was particularly destroyed. That's the only way I can describe it.
Very hard on her that you had been diagnosed and she had really done well herself.
Well, this is why I said earlier, the relevance of where my wife came in is extremely relevant to where we are today
I understand.
is because that yes, we'd guessed something was wrong. We guessed I was ill, but we didn't know at that point. We understood I was going to be made better.
Yeah.
But once she was told no, her life was destroyed.
Well, you'd had all those symptoms, the vomiting and the weight loss, that had gone on for a long time. Only, I think, when the second gastroenterologist saw you, did they say, I'm going to make sure we discover what's wrong.
Absolutely. And that, of course, is all part of what destroyed my wife. She clearly feels that we were really let down. I'm sorry to tell, because I come from an era, and this is what particularly annoys me, Dr. Mitchell, I come from an age when the National Health Service didn't even exist when I was born.
Yeah.
And I also come through an era where you believed what doctors tell you. You know, as I'm sure I'm an older person, I'm sure you've come up against this before. If the doctor says jump up in the air, well, you jumped.
Sure.
You did that. But there is no doubt here that even from the independent surveys that we've already done, the things are the main comment. Many comments similar, but the main comment is standards fell well below accepted standards in my case.
And I totally hear what you're saying, and that's not an acceptable place to be personally. But as a lesson, when we're watching this, perhaps other healthcare providers or other organizations are watching this, would there be anything simple in your story that could be corrected for the future?
Yes, it was because of my age at the time. When I first went in, I was 65. Anyway, because of my age, things like an endoscopy and other examinations should have been done. It simply shouldn't have been left to a high pylori spasm, whatever it is. But because of my age, and the key word throughout all of this, and always has been, endoscopy.
You wanted that definitive investigation, and it was delayed significantly.
The GP referred it, put it in the notes in 2009. The consultant gynaecologist, I have to say, has already written an apology to us for perhaps his patronising behaviour, i.e. I'm the world's leading expert, etc.
This is the first gastroenterologist?
This is the first gastroenterologist. And as I say, the independent review, my wife took all this. I really wasn't interested, but my wife took it up with PALS, with King's College Hospital, the independent
patient advisor
liaison
service,
who they called in to have a look at my record, simply said an endoscopy and other tests, but obviously the endoscopy, because again, when I went into hospital in June, the second time as an emergency patient, that was the continual question I was asked by everybody: what was the result of the endoscopy?
Hearing all that about what went wrong, and then you attempt to get an answer and I guess closure to that in a way. You obviously did pursue it through PALS as an advocate, and you eventually received an apology.
Yes.
Do you feel that apology was satisfactory and lessons were learned from that?
No. As soon as we found out that I had, as I say, classed as terminally ill with stomach cancer, it was my wife that took over. Mentally, I can't handle it. Mentally, I cannot handle it. And my wife took it over, and she pursued the matter. But even the PALS also apologised for their failure to investigate the matter properly in the time that... Well, I say not their failure, I do correct that. No, they were excellent. The time it took. Because one of the things you learn when you're in my position, if something has got wrong, by God, do those doctors want to shut up and pull up the barriers? They really, really do. It took ages to get stuff from the GP, etc. So the apology itself from Dr. Consultant 1, if I can put it, totally unacceptable. One, because it was clear from the independent review that we already had done by another gastroenterologist consultant, he didn't do his job properly. And secondly, I have no issue with him saying I'm the world's leading expert. I'm a retired police officer. God, I've heard this with people, and it just went over my head, but it stuck with me, is that I have no doubt that he wrote the letter because apparently he would take persuading to put anything pen to paper with his own self-preservation, i.e. if he hadn't written the letter, because of what happened to me, there is every opportunity at his annual review or by review, I don't know. I know that we were told in review that there was a possibility that he could have lost his consultancy. So having known what we know about Dr. Consultant 1, he did it for self-preservation and not for my benefit or for my wife's benefit. I don't really want to make a criticism of the health service. That is not what I'm here to do.
I'm actually curious whether people who are in a similar position where they feel stuck about their care, whether you feel it's still worthwhile pursuing the complaint to get an answer, and if so, you know, whether lessons are learnt about what went wrong for future patients' benefit. You know, it's a tricky one to know. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer necessarily.
Well, there isn't, and you're quite right. I agree with it to a certain point. That clearly, lessons have to be learnt so it doesn't happen again. However, as I say, my wife's life's destroyed, and she's going to pursue this to the bitter end. She just wants, if you like, we go back to the apology. She just wants a proper apology. Somebody to actually say, sorry, we made a mistake, or we got it wrong. Because even in Dr. Consultant 1's letter, he didn't actually say we got it wrong. He apologised more for his attitude and the way he dealt with it, as opposed to the fact that he got it wrong.
So you want really, shall I describe it as an honest, heartfelt apology?
Indeed. I personally don't.
Yeah,
I personally don't. But in order for me to be happy, my wife has to be happy, and so therefore she has to have, if you can understand that, for her to be happy, she has to have that.
I understand. So let me ask you now about your reaction to that very serious diagnosis you had, because you were told some very black and white statements about your condition. Sometimes when people go for their diagnosis, even if they have an advanced condition, the consultants are very reluctant to tell them, you know, the full story.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
But you seem to receive that. I know it was much delayed, but when you eventually found out, you were told it is quite advanced, that you are in a terminal condition, meaning your life is very much limited. And you said earlier that there was only palliative treatment available, which means that there was no chance of a cure. Only the symptoms could be managed, if you like. How did that sit with you? Because people will be wondering, you know, when you're on the receiving end about all that information, isn't it tempting to think, well, is there any point carrying on now?
The interesting thing there is that I lived in London at the time, and I now live in Whitwick, and my care was taken over by the Leicester Royal. When I went through roughly the story that I've just told, exactly what you have just said, and perhaps something to be taken up, whereas the oncology unit in Guy's Hospital came bluntly straight out with it, which may be their feeling, Leicester Royal Oncology Unit say we will always ask, do you want to know? We will simply not tell somebody straight away how serious they are unless they want to. That's just a difference in hospital views. Surprisingly enough, when I was told, again, I really wasn't overly concerned in a sense, because by that time I felt that something was seriously wrong anyway. And I'd felt that for some time. So I'd already had, give or take, somewhere between 12 months and 2 years to actually get accustomed to the fact that I possibly had stomach cancer.
You suspected a serious problem?
I suspected a very, very serious problem. Didn't know it was stomach cancer, but by the time I was actually told myself that I was really quite, no, don't get me wrong, I cried my eyes out in the consultant room, don't get me wrong. I was very emotional, quite distressed about it, but I wasn't as bad as I thought, because by that time I'd actually got used to it. The only real concern that bothered me is how could there be such a great difference between being told in August 2011 that it's curable and operable, and less than 3 weeks later I'm told it's terminal. There has to be, I'm not in that field, but there has to be something wrong there. Even I don't think cancer becomes that serious in a 3-week period.
No.
Even I don't believe that. It may do.
Obviously, it's possible for the cancer to advance and them to have further results of tests, but it's more likely that their opinion of the treatability changed in that period. You know, at one time they thought they were going to do a certain procedure, maybe surgery, and then very soon after, maybe after a meeting, they decided not to.
I have no idea. I really don't. But as I say, I wasn't actually. I was distressed. Don't get me wrong, but I wasn't overly distressed to the point of you know of life changing, for the want of a better phrase.
You wanted an answer, and you got an answer. It wasn't a pleasant one, but you didn't.
I was quite happy with the way I was told. You know, I'm quite a blunt man myself, and you know, a spade is a spade to me, and I was quite happy. It was just I've mentioned the difference between what Leicester Royal would have done as to what Guy's actually did. I think that's more for your benefit, Dr. Mitchell, and for anybody else watching this video.
So let's come on now to what happened next in terms of the kind of treatment plan.
Well, after obviously you've been told that I'd obviously cancer, the way it was put to me is I had 6 months to live. If I had chemotherapy, that could be extended to around the 12-month period, but I was told quite bluntly that in no way would I live beyond my 67th birthday. Now you can understand why the 68 bit a little bit earlier was important. I was told quite bluntly that I would not live beyond my 67th birthday. Actually, that in a very strange way was a great help, which I'll come back to in a moment. Guy's Hospital were very good. It took plenty of time to explain chemotherapy to me and all the rest of it, although they might have missed off one thing. Because during the period of chemotherapy, I twice got ready, I think is the best way to describe it, to commit suicide. I wouldn't put it that I attempted to commit suicide, I'll put it rather along the way that I got ready to commit suicide. And this is for the dog owners out there. Not everybody loves dogs, but this is for those who own dogs. When I knew I was going to have chemotherapy, my wife and I decided to buy a dog because we knew I had to get out of the house for exercise, fresh air, call it whatever you will. And I knew because I was unable to work, I'd stopped working by then because I was so ill. I'd been sick in police stations and stuff like that, which was not very helpful. And got a dog, and we got a little Yorkshire Terrier called Maggie, and we got her in the October of 2011. I do not know why, but I chose that I would get into my car. Again, I was living in London at the time. I would drive up the M1. I would take my car as fast as I possibly could, 100 mile or more, and just simply drive into the nearest bridge, post, or whatever looked concretey enough and hard enough for me to drive into. My wife, to get away from me, and quite understandably, was a bingo with her friends. It was a one escape route on a Sunday evening, and I actually got myself dressed to actually do this. And I got the car keys in my hand, and I went to the front door. Now, little Maggie, for some reason or another, never been trained to do it. Whenever we got dressed to go out, myself and my wife, she went and sat up the top of the stairs. And I went to the door, and I don't know why, I looked up and said, look, you know, tell your mistress, I'm sorry, I've got to do this, there's no way out for me, I've got to give her peace, or whatever words I said at the time. And of course, a little 4-month-old puppy sitting at the top of the head, cocked her head to one side, I couldn't do it. So thanks to little Maggie, I just couldn't do it. I actually tried it again 2 weeks later and did exactly the same thing. Looked up to Maggie and say, look, tell your mistress, you know, I really am sorry, etc., etc. And she cocked her head. And for any dog lover out there, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. I couldn't do it, and here I am still today.
Wow, that's quite a shocking story, but also powerful. I mean, what you're talking about there are reasons to carry on.
Yes.
You know, in life, you need reasons to think life's worth living, things to look forward to.
Yes.
And they can be little things as well as big things.
Yes. Well, one of the things that we had done is that I'd already planned to move when I retired from the police service. But because of my wife's breast cancer, again, this is the relevance how it comes back, we actually put moving on hold in 2006. So we didn't move. We were actually going to move down near where my son lived in Ashford in Kent. We put it on hold. When my wife, or when we was getting to this era of say 3 or 4 years after my wife got breast cancer, we were getting signs that things were going well. So we decided to put the house back on the market again, so that hopefully when she did get the all clear, we were able to move. I then of course got my cancer, or things weren't going well at the time, so we took the house off the market. Having been diagnosed, and this is one of the important things that you've just mentioned, Dr. Mitchell, is that having now knowing the problem, we put the house back on the market for sale. And surprisingly enough, because I had a time limit to work to, i.e. my 67th birthday, there or thereabouts, it gave me a lot to do. It gave me moving. It gave what to do with the house. And the one thing I will say on this video that has to be taken up by everybody, power of attorney. That is so vitally important for someone in my position, because I know there will come a time when I can't make a decision for myself.
Is that something you've already organised?
Yes, oh yes. Yes, we have. I mean, as I say, the being told I had stomach cancer and curable surprisingly gave me a little lease of life, for the want of a better phrase, because we moved, I had all the business, because my wife also realised, this is where our relationship is, I look after all that side of things, my wife looks after me. I know it may sound sexist to some people, but it's lasted us for 33 years of marriage. It works for us. And so I was happy moving, making the removal arrangements, sorting out wills, making sure our finances were in order, and say most importantly, a power of attorney, which is vitally important for anybody in my position. But I had all that to do, and strange way, quite enjoyed it. I was struggling mentally with it because of the effects of chemotherapy, but nevertheless we got there.
So how do we understand, as a viewer, and from my own perspective, this kind of slight contradiction between those suicidal impulses and plans, and then that lease of life to tidy up your affairs within the time frame that you thought you had left?
Because probably at the time when I was thinking of suicide, I say I was going to commit suicide. I'm not quite so sure 100% in my own mind that that's what I actually wanted to do.
No, but there was a thought in that direction.
Oh, there was a thought in that direction. But surprisingly enough, what I didn't realise, and it may well be worth a thought, is that when I looked at the side effects of the steroids I was taking, it did actually say suicide.
It's possible, because steroids can induce
depression, suicide, a whole list of things. So,
in which case we could say that bit was slightly out of character.
It would have. It would have been. I'm quite normally a very strong personality. I'm not so strong now as I used to be. I might, but you can imagine 30 years in the police service, 35 odd years playing rugby, chair of governors, you know, all these things. Quite a strong personality.
Definitely.
But here I am. You're quite right. Thinking about suicide, as opposed to. But after that, once we got the house sort of moving thing going, once that took over, there was so much to do that I probably didn't have time to think of anything else. And I desperately wanted everything to be in place for my wife for when the time came. Everything had to be, even down to the fact that we had all the walls painted in the house, she didn't have to worry about it. We did everything.
You know, sometimes when somebody says they're feeling like they want to end their life, occasionally it's actually a method of almost keeping control, because when somebody says this is happening to you, this is your diagnosis, this is what's going to happen in a few years, you're relatively passive in that. You can almost be the victim of the diagnosis. But if you say, well, I'm going to think about not being here in a next week, you can kind of be in control of the situation, even if you don't go through with it.
You can use it to energise yourself. You can use it to energise yourself. And the problem, of course, now is quite simply that I'm now past my 67th birthday. As I said, I'm 68.
Yes.
But I'm in a worse position now because, one, I've done all the things that perhaps I wanted to do and have done. But of course now, I don't know what's going to happen. I still have the thought that I wish to die. That remains my number one thought.
You do, so that's still in the back of your mind.
I wish to die. However, I'm a bit of a coward. I will not do it myself. But again, the trouble is, on my 68th birthday, just to give you an example, is I was, in the morning of my 68th birthday, I got up at 3:15 in the morning and was still there at 4:30, 4:45 in the morning, actually reeking and wrenching and burping. I felt absolutely terrible. But then you think to yourself, is this it? You don't know. Is this it? Is this what's going, is this me? Am I now finished? Because that's what you think while your head's in the bucket or down the toilet. You don't always think straight. And of course, standing by me, rubbing my back, of course, is my poor wife again. Another problem I have, for example, is my wife doesn't sleep in the same bed as me. She thinks she's going to wake up to a dead man every morning.
Is that the reason she's moved to a different bed?
Yes.
She's afraid of...
Our relationship is loving and all that goes with it, etc, etc. In fact, our children tell us off for being quite soppy at times and things like that. But she sleeps in a separate room because she's frightened. Again, I understand. One of the other great things about having the cancer I've got, and maybe other people have found it, is you do see things in a different light, and you have a far more understanding of people who do have issues, which to us, or normal person, for the want of a better phrase, might seem, that's a bit petty, that's a bit rubbish. What are you thinking that for? But when you're in the position,
you can put things in perspective.
You see it in entirely different light. I go back quickly to my daughter. She lost Sophia May Sophia May was about 13 weeks. I'm not particularly happy with the way that my daughter has fallen pregnant again. But then, having said that, I fully understand why she's fallen, what went on up here, because this is where it is. This is where it all happens. Not down here, it all happens up here. So I understand why she fell pregnant again, even if I'm not happy at the way it was done.
To make a comment on your wife moving to a separate room, that's a manifestation of her anxiety.
Oh yes.
And it's a good reminder for me and healthcare professionals that often nearest and dearest family members are struggling a lot with somebody's cancer that they're observing in their loved one.
That's right.
That can be an area which is not recognised by us enough, and we should perhaps do more for husbands, wives who are really living through it via their loved one.
Well, I go back to the point that I made with St Thomas's, of course, when my wife was able to go, before we knew about me, and she was able to go along to the support sessions but of course, because whatever was required, it required the nurse to be there, and that nurse was end of. And so for 3 or 4 years, well, 3 years or so, she didn't have any. So she was very, very fortunate that when she came up here, she was approached by Marlene Reed, who have got a cancer support unit, as I say, support for those people living with people who have cancer.
Yeah.
So she does that. But no, you are quite right. I'm okay with what's with me. I'm okay, although I wish I would die and get it over and done with, protect my wife and all that. I live with it. I've learned with your help, because we've spoken on a couple of occasions, I've learned to live with it. I've learned to control it. My wife hasn't, and it is my wife. And I'm sure, as you quite rightly say, the loved ones of anybody, wife or not, or children or whatever, their thoughts, and they're not always looked after as well as they should be. I know she can go to the Macmillan nurses. We actually have approached Macmillan nurses. We've told them who we are, but we've never seen them. we know we can call her, but as I say, she does go to Marlene Reed, which is a little help to her.
One thing that strikes me in your account is you're not afraid to talk about very hard issues, about your own mortality, about death, about how long you might have left. Okay, I know you've beaten the odds already, but the truth is you are talking in very black and white terms, and not everyone's able to do that. In society, we're often not comfortable talking about our own mortality, but you are, and you're able to face those. Is it an advantage in terms of planning your affairs, that kind of thing, to be able to, think about your own mortality and address it?
I have no fear of dying at all, absolutely none whatsoever. It will happen. Whether I like it or not, whether I have stomach cancer or not, I will die. That's the end of the story. I'm 68. I'm hopefully a few years away from dying, but on the other hand, I'm a few years nearer dying, bearing in mind that I have gone, as I've said already, past my sell-by date. As I said at the time, when I actually was given a sell-by date, I was given a lease of life in a sense, in that I could things that quite frankly you wouldn't think about. With great respect to perhaps your age, Dr. Mitchell, or your age, Heather, a lot of people of that age do not think about the future and what's going to happen when they die. And then suddenly, totally out of the blue, sorry, you're terminally ill. You've got stomach cancer. And you say, oh my God. And that is when I start planning. What I try to do now is that although I wish I were dead, and I'm quite happy to control that aspect, what I try to do now is to wake up every morning. I play bowls. I am a Freemason. And also I have a garden. And although I find the garden physically difficult, I do overcome. My wife would tell you I'm a belligerent, obnoxious person. I was going to say something else then, but then I also take the view, well, if that belligerence and obnoxiousness has got me here, well, I will carry on being belligerent and obnoxious, and I'm not really bothered about, in a sense, what other people say. People in the bowling club are absolutely marvellous. They have given me a new lease of life. I would say that in fairness to them. I've never played bowls. They are such lovely, lovely people, and they themselves have lost loved ones through cancer and through various illnesses, and of course have people suffering with various cancers and various difficulties. So they are of a great help, but initially I'm not afraid of dying.
No.
It's an inevitable fact of life which I've accepted a long, long time ago.
But by the same token, you haven't given up at all. You're still active, you're still maintaining some positive activities, and you're still actually maintaining a quality of life that means, from my point of view, but I want to know your answer, it seems like it's worthwhile living right now.
I think my belligerency, my obnoxiousness, whatever anybody wants to call it, I wouldn't like to say, at the end of the day, rules. And although, as I've said before, I would be quite happy to die and wish that to happen, belligerency and obnoxious, probably just slightly above that thought. And that, of course, if I do go, then of course there's my wife. So I have to keep going. I have to keep going for my wife, Sandra, bless her. You keep going for her. She has to have a life. As I say, we are each other. We are one and the same, whatever romantic terms anybody wants to use. We are one and the same person, and it really hurts me, again, which I think takes over slightly the thought of dying. It hurts me to see her suffer the way she does, because if I'm sick, she'll be sick. If I've got a backache, she'll have a backache. if I'm having a problem going to the toilet, I'm sure you'll give it a term or a phrase, Dr. Mitchell. I'm sure you will. If I have a backache or go to difficulty going to, so does she. She carries, at least the way I see it. She will probably tell you differently. She would tell you differently.
Well, it's almost like
always seems very strange that if I'm going through a rough time of sickness, that suddenly she goes.
Almost like an empathetic suffering, that
Yes.
you put yourself in the shoes of
Yes.
somebody else, but yet you almost have their symptoms.
That's right.
Which is a very curious phenomenon, really.
Because there is this age gap between my wife, which is also, there is, again for the lads out there, I went out with my wife 3 months after her 18th birthday. I was 32 at the time, and here we still are. So I'm also aware that even if I died, we were always prepared, and this is another thought. We were always ready that I would die a long time before her anyway, if things took their natural course in life, that because there's 13 years, 14 years between us, I would die at a certain age, and she would still have a relative period of life after that, and that still stands.
Well, I'm actually interested in that particularly. I'll tell you why. It's because for many people talking about these issues, the hardest thing is for them to face the idea that they're not going to be around and the other person's still carrying on. They'll miss out on certain things, but then they're not there to support the other person, and vice versa. I don't know any way that's obvious to me to get around that kind of block, but you seem able to at least talk about it or face it.
Yes, I'm open, and we'll talk about anything. I think one of the great things, and I go back to my daughter Sarah, is that there has been no doubt in my family, and certainly with me, that when my time does come, my wife would follow very, very quickly, whether she wanted to, or by her own hand, or whatever. And so one of the reasons we came up to Whittick is our daughter Sarah already lives here.
Yeah.
And the other reason is that Rebecca, our youngest daughter, moved to Swallington, just round the corner, but although she now lives in Ashby. Rebecca has had a young child, Mason, bless him. But Sarah, I believe, not only is she carried on having a child because she lost Sophia May, I also believe, in my mind, whether it's true or not, I don't know, that she's having another child in order to give my wife in order to give my wife something to live for when the time comes. My Sandra is a typical mother hen. She is a typical mother hen. No one touches her children, even though Sarah is a police officer, highly trained in everything. No one, and whatever the rights and wrongs our children do, no one touches them. That's Sandra. So I believe that whether she thinks it or not,
whether it's conscious or unconscious,
it's my belief that Sarah is also having another child, which is due in November. Because again, I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow. It's one of the downsides of not knowing, although we keep going. I do believe that Sarah is having a child in order that Sandra will have something, I don't know which is the real correct way of saying this, but something to do when I'm gone. Let's leave it at that, I think.
Now, you mentioned there that you moved to Whittick. So you moved from a city metropolitan environment, very busy, chaotic environment in London, to a rural environment, very different. Was that part of your planning?
Yes. When we first planned on moving back in 2006, as I mentioned before, we were moving to Ashford in Kent. We were thinking of doing that's where my son by my first marriage lives. But of course, as you can, a relatively busy area, not as busy as London, but relatively area. When I found out I had stomach cancer, to put it bluntly, I just wanted to be somewhere to live where I could die quietly. It was as simple as that. And obviously Whittick we chose because my daughter was here. We knew Whittick. We'd been backwards and forwards obviously to see my daughter over the years, and Whittick was a nice little place. You don't have to go far to be in the country, and why those idiots fly around these roads and not enjoy the countryside and what God gave them, I have absolutely no idea. Although again, I can understand it. God gave them some beautiful countryside up here to look at. Well, keep to the speed limit by all means, but have a look at it and enjoy it, because when you're in my position, it may be the last time that I can sit. And one of the great things about being a police officer is you do get a different sense of humour. Well, when you see death and you deal with death as you do as a police officer, you see it. And so we can have a little chuckle about death.
Do you think that career affected your current attitude to your future?
I think it has helped. I think it has helped because you do see death in a different light. And perhaps subconsciously seeing death, seeing how other people deal with death. I can remember one police officer, for example, on being told by the police officer that a relative had died, the relative took an axe to the police officer.
Really?
Yes. On the other hand, you could tell somebody and they'll just collapse a heap in the floor. So yes, I have seen death dealt differently, and I've also obviously been in a mortuary and so on and so forth. But perhaps like professional healthcare, and when you're dealing with death and when you're dealing with other people's misery, you do have a weird sense of humour that perhaps helps you come to terms. It might be wrong, and you try and keep it amongst yourselves. But yes, I do think, because I hope through the video I've had a laugh and a chuckle about dying. It is, I mean, one of the funny things was, for example, is that my wife wanted to bury me down in London, in a place called Brenchley Gardens. She's changed her mind on that. It was a bit too far to go. But one of the standing things amongst us was, well, just stick me in a wheelbarrow, trundle me off down to the M1, and we'll get down there that way. My wife doesn't always see that, but that's the policeman's side of me coming out, that I can see it.
Having a sense of humour is generally a very positive way of coping.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. As I say, at the Bowls Club, I mean, I don't want to sound arrogant or anything like that, but I have brought a sense of humour
to the club, yeah. To
the club, and this has been commented on again because I have a policeman's sense of humour. Which was also developed when I worked with the public before I became a police officer, because if to work with the public, you've got to have a sense of humour. Truly a sense of humour, and it does help. But the thought still remains that I want to die. All these other things, if I can put it this way, they're all the things: sense of humour, belligerent, obnoxiousness. Keep it that simple. I want to die, and that, because it's a powerful block, is beating that one at the moment.
It's almost
there may
like
be a time that one might push back a bit, but there is that constant battle. But fortunately for me, that I can overcome it, and I have a wife who cares and loves for me, and well, she's just got to be put right, bless her.
One question I nearly always ask people is, would you be able to give advice to somebody who was coming fresh with your condition, newly diagnosed, given what you've been through and all your experience? Is there any tip, encouragement, or anything really that you think might be useful for them, assuming they're watching you now and they're newly diagnosed?
I think the first thing that I would say is, despite my own personal experience of how I got to be where I was, I think you still have to place a lot of faith and trust in the professionals that are looking after you. Yes, in my case, it's debatable whether they got it right, it's debatable whether they got it wrong. From the video you will know our views, but you can make up your own minds. I think you genuinely need the support of the people around you, your family. One of the things you find very, very difficult is, particularly in my case, as I'm sure is in many others, you are not only physically affected, but you are mentally affected. And it is the mental effects that probably are the side that your family, your friends, etc. see. They don't see the illness, as you can see I'm sitting here, you wouldn't have a clue there was anything wrong with me. So you do need the support, and you have to think about them. I think it's very, very important to think about them, not to necessarily think about yourself, although what is happening to you is vitally important to you. Do think about the people who are around you. I know it's very difficult to say, and it's a naff thing to say, but you do have to try and remain as positive as you possibly can. I may have come across as, and I'm sure perhaps you will agree, that there are times I've perhaps come across as not being as positive as perhaps I should have been. But nevertheless, I am still here. My lifestyle has probably helped me be here. My life experiences has helped me be here. There is nothing in life that I want to do. When I first was told I was terminally ill, it's one of the questions that my family asked me, is there anything you want to do? I've fortunately been blessed that I've done virtually everything I need to do. But if there is something you want to do, you damn well go ahead and do it. And if it costs you, you can't take the money with you. So if you've got it in the house, or you've got it in the post office, take it out and do what I did. I got married to my wife twice. Cost me an awful lot of money, but trust me, the memories I have of that, and they are memories that keep me going. They are memories that help to keep me going. But you do have to trust the professionals. You have to take it on the chin. What's happened to you, there's nothing you can do about it. If you are terminally ill like myself, you never know. I'm past my sell-by dates. You never know, it may happen to you. Be positive and think it may never happen to you, that your sell-by date will come and go, and you'll be there to annoy your children in years to come.
You had a long career in the police force.
Yes.
What was your role actually in the police force?
I was just a police constable, working on the streets of Peckham.
On the front line.
On the front line, so to speak. I was in the Brixton riots. Well, I wasn't in the Brixton riots, but I was policing the Brixton riots. I'll rephrase that one. Policing the Brixton riots.
So that's where it's all happening, isn't it?
Did many other riots, newspaper riots, etc., that were going on at the time.
You know, on the streets there, that's where you've got the contact with the public all the time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Good and bad.
They're a damn good bunch of people, actually, the public. Even though we worked in an area called Peckham, I mean, it's not as bad as people make it out to be. You meet some out and out bastards, and I'll put that in even for the video. But in general, you meet some very, very nice people. Very nice people indeed. Did you
use like the trust and the fact that you were known to your advantage? You know, because that can be quite powerful, can't it be? There's one thing a stranger asking how things are, and there's another asking somebody who you actually see regularly asking how things are.
I was very fortunate. I was for a Metropolitan Police officer. I actually lived in the area that I worked, and my wife could walk safely anywhere in that area without comment or criticism, and that because I like to think I dealt with people fairly and squarely, etc. That she could do that, and without fear, without prejudice. No one ever challenged my wife. As I say, we lived local, she shopped local, and all that went with it.
I want to ask you about the bigger picture about maintaining work and the importance of keeping a role, because if I'm understanding correctly in the timeline, you did give up work because of ill health?
Yes.
And was that a big day to not be in that role anymore?
Yes. I come from an era, going to go back to my age, where you work to live, because that's what you did. You didn't live to work, but you worked to live. And so yes, I worked out at the end of the day that I'd worked for 50 years and 3 days.
Really?
Totally. In all that time, I had 1 day out of work.
Wow.
And I spent that 1 day looking for a job, which I got. So yes, when I retired from the police service in 2006, one of the dangers is that I would be sitting around indoors moping, etc.,
Yes,
etc.
exactly.
What am I going to do with myself, and so on. And so I took up this accreditation, but as I say, I was very, very disappointed that I had to stop work because, as I say, I was being sick in police stations and so on and so forth. But then, having said that, I'm quite, if that's the right word, I'm enjoying my life as it is at the moment. The winters are very difficult, and that is when I'm probably at my lowest ebb, because you can't get out. It's bleak. At one stage, for example, at the beginning of this year, and I think I may have told you that I was so depressed and so down that I had to get a friend of mine just to bring in a pint of milk and a loaf of bread because I couldn't get out of the house. I was so low. Things had really got me down, and I think, go back to this point, I got past my 67th birthday. Now where do I go? Hang on, I've just had another Christmas. I'm not supposed to have another Christmas. I've just had another New Year. I'm not supposed to have another New Year. You know, very, very difficult. But having got over that, and well, say the summer's here, looking out the window at the moment. I have a garden, which I've now got where I want it to be. I have, as I say, bowls, which I've got where I want it to be. And strangely enough, just to sit in the garden and do nothing, apart from read a book perhaps, is another place where I want to be. So where I want to be at the moment is fine. I'm not looking forward to the winter coming round, but we'll see where that takes us.
I'm curious, did you used to notice the winter in that way when you were working?
No. Apart from the fact it was cold or snow, no, I did. Never, it was never an issue, winter. You do notice, obviously, that the winters are a little bit worse in northwest Leicestershire than they are in London. Oh, absolutely, because obviously the snow doesn't stay on the ground like it used to. It's 2 or 3 degrees warmer in London with street lights, cars, houses, etc., etc. Where, of course, being out here in the open, it's a little bit different. But I do move forward now with a lot more positive. I'm getting over the fact that I'm still here, and it's very difficult. Strange thing to say, isn't it? But I am slowly, with your help, because we have spoken, I am getting over the idea of why am I still here? Although that will always remain, but it's going further to the back of the mind, if I can put it that way, because all the belligerence, the optimisticness, the obnoxiousness, the bowling, and all the other things, and my wife, of course, they have taken over. There's not this battle with the two now.
Well, David, it's really incredible to hear your story from start to finish, not just the illness-related story, but all those extra bits about your life and all the things that you've been through and experienced, in your career. It's quite amazing, really. And I think that has altered your view. Some people might find it too harsh, too black and white, some of the things that you say. But they've got to understand what you've seen and what you've been through. It's a personal thing to you. Indeed. And it has, in some ways, made your ability to face the future, which is time limited, more able to be dealt with at this time.
Oh, indeed.
Do you know what I mean? You're able to talk about it. You're able to think about it, and you're able to make plans.
That's right. I'm actually already. We have a timeshare in Tenerife, which we're going to in October. We're already planning that for next year. Fortunately, it's a timeshare, so it's there anyway. My aim at the moment now is to reach 70.
Okay.
That is the aim at the moment.
You keep extending the lease
to get to 70. But for the benefit of anybody watching this video, I do understand that the idea that you want to go will never ever leave you, and you just hopefully. I know my life is a bit black and white, but certainly my experiences with the public, being on the board of governors, etc., etc. I think all those life's experiences, if I can put it that way, have perhaps helped me look forward a little bit more positively. Still don't know when it's going to happen, but I shall still, if the rain stops, I shall still be going out for a game of bowls this afternoon.
Thanks for coming in and sharing your story. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much indeed to both of you. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.